Welcome to today's ATARC webinar on low-code application development. My name is Jonathan Albaum, and I'm the Federal CTO for ServiceNow, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel. Prior to joining ServiceNow, I worked in the federal government for many years as a CIO. And throughout my federal career, my teams and I were always on a mission to modernize systems, decommission legacy technologies, and ultimately transform the way our agencies worked. Today, in increasingly more instances, low-code application development is powering this transformation. Advancing the government's digital evolution necessitates a collaboration beyond IT. It's got to include every agency employee, in my opinion. And with a mission-focused and tech-savvy federal workforce, low-code application development is the perfect approach to rapidly deploy applications that drive immediate improvements in how government works. Low-code solutions empower non-technical professionals to construct digital workflows and capabilities, and that can eliminate the bottleneck that arises when all development tasks get assigned to IT. And by offering low-code solutions, the CIO can emerge as a leader that's energizing and accelerating mission success. We have a terrific lineup of experts today to help us explore the transformative power of low-code application development. Our discussion is going to address best practices, governance, and training needed to support and scale low-code solutions across your agencies. But before we get started, I want to offer special thanks to Maddie Mitschke from ATARC for helping to organize today's webinar. And our session will include a few poll questions and the opportunity for audience Q&A. You can submit you can submit questions to our panelists using the Q&A section of this platform, and be sure to answer the poll questions to receive CPE credit. I'd now like for our panelists to introduce themselves. So as I call your name, please turn on your camera, come off mute, and share a little bit about your background and what you're working on today. Let's start with Leanne Oliver, who is the Director of Corporate Business Systems at the Office of the CFO at the U.S. Department of Energy. Hi, Leanne.
Okay, for some reason, the host has, oh, there we go. There we go. Hi. I'm Leanne Oliver. I work in the CFO's office. I run the 32 systems that support the basic admin functions for the entire Department of Energy. That includes personnel, accounting, procurement, basically the stuff that no one really thinks about until it doesn't work. And then we hear about it. We have done a lot. We're in the process of doing a lot of things related to digital transformation, and we're looking at low code as a way of doing some of those things. We moved all of our systems into the cloud about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and so we're optimizing cloud usage, and we're moving forward with zero trust and all the other things that we're expected to do with our core systems, some of which have high value assets.
Well, thanks, Leanne. Look forward to having you join us today. Next, I'd like to introduce Matisha Montgomery, who is the Chief Learning Officer at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Jonathan. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to hopefully bring a slightly different perspective than my colleagues on the panel. Serving as the Chief Learning Officer, we're obviously focused on continuous development of our employees, reskilling and upskilling, and how the transformation and changes of the world of work really do impact the employee and where they can take their skill set as well as their career. And then, of course, as a member of the Department of Housing and Urban Development and delivery of services to our employees, we are looking to continuously improve the employee experience through the use and application of low-code development and other solutions that help us to streamline, transform, and create efficiencies, and overall improve that experience. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with folks today, and thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here, Matisha. I think you'll add a lot to our conversation. Next up is Skip Bailey, who is the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Office of the CIO at the U.S. Census Bureau. Hi, Skip.
Hi, good morning, and glad to be here. I currently, as Deputy Chief Information Officer, I'm responsible for really the IT assets within the Census Bureau, and we have a very federated kind of IT function. So there are several groups of IT that are not directly under the CIO, but yet from FITARA, we're responsible for them. So it's kind of an interesting relationship. But we do manage both the back office things like Leanne talked about, as well as many of the mission systems that go forward. And we have a very sophisticated workforce, a lot of PhD statisticians and so forth. And so, as you can imagine, they do a lot of code development. It's not even necessarily low code, but we have a lot of development that goes on outside of the direct IT control.
Yeah, and one of the things we want to talk about with you, Skip, during this conversation is how do we bring those skills into the fold using low-code technology. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. And last but certainly not least is Suman Shukla, who is the Data Management Section Head at the Product Management Division at the U.S. Copyright Office. Welcome, Suman.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. As it's been stated, I'm a section head for the data management team and the product management division in Copyright Office, which is part of Library of Congress. We have wealth of data. Technically, it's the biggest data repository in the world for copyright data sets. And I fall in both sides of the house for going for the low code, no code development, as well as also the complex applications, since we have a wide range of requirements. We have people who are basically not so tech savvy, not so into coding and development. So they are doing certain things for a quick and easy and dirty product, so they can do things very quickly and provide some value. And there's also, we have chief economists and we have lots of statisticians doing the work for publishing data for regular users. So we would like to have some complex systems over there. So from legacy system to the new system, from low code to the complex applications, we are all over the place. So looking forward to this discussion.
Well, very good. I want to get started actually by having our audience answer the first poll question. Matt, if you could put that up there. What is the biggest inhibitor to delivering value at the velocity the mission desires? We know the mission always wants to go fast. So curious what people will say here, and we'll share those results shortly. But Suman, I'd like to continue with you. And first question for the panel is, how do low-code technologies really empower those non-technical professionals you were just mentioning? And how can we help them really contribute to the digital transformation that we were talking about before? More efficient processes, better ways of working that we've already thought about.
Absolutely. So everybody knows not everybody's tech savvy. Not everybody has all the knowledge and expertise about coding or complex algorithms, or have the exposure or even the experience. There are all sorts of resources there. So we do have people who wants to do data-driven decision making, or who wants to develop certain things but do not have that technical expertise. And with the low code, no code, it's easier for them. For example, the drag drop features, they have already a solution there. They can feed the data into it, churn quick dashboards or reports or KPIs, or even develop certain applications with multiple pages without getting into the Java, Python, C++, and all those coding syntax and technologies, or even working in databases like Access, or creating certain things in spreadsheets. It's more easier for them to understand or develop things into that than go through the training of, it's more about training and understanding and experience. So if you want a quick return of investment, if you want to do something, a quick POC or something that can be done, a quick and dirty solution for any purpose, it's easier to go with the low code, no code than the complex one. So, but it's not a solution for everything. We can go with this for specific things that can be easily done and quickly done and may have a low-hanging fruit kind of a solution, but it may not be applicable in the different area. So we have to decide where it fits best.
I think, something you just said there that's very interesting. It's not always the right solution, and it's not. It's easy to,
Yes.
land on that low code tool that we like, and then we are anchored to it, and everything suddenly is a we want to use low code. Skip, I'm curious if you could jump in here a little bit, because when our prep, you were talking a little bit about trying to thread the needle between an enterprise solution or a local low code solution. How do you pick? In your experience, what's the approach?
Well, and that's to me the key to this whole discussion. If we look back of low code as we call it today is not a new concept. It's been around a long time. We can go back clear to the a spreadsheet is one of the early low code opportunities. It used to take programmers to do the stuff that spreadsheets do. And then if you look at most end user tools, they started off really as things that were things that people had to use, but could only use it through a programmer. So the key is really what we're trying to drive from an enterprise standpoint and what we want to be common. And if people are doing their own little thing and they're just trying to do something for their own purposes, that's an ideal spot for low code. If things are part of the corporate, part of, so to speak, the corporate asset of data, then we have to be a little more careful, because one of the problems you end up with is you may have proliferation of many instances of data, and what's the authoritative source? Now we have 25 versions of something, and because everyone's building their own thing. For me, the key is transparency and communication. If we all know what everybody's doing, we can be very transparent. Then we can have discussions about what makes sense to make this more of an enterprise approach, and what makes sense to let this proliferate and grow on its own. And also we're in a unique situation because we have very skilled technical people that are not in IT, and so their quote low code stuff is like R and Python. It's not very low, but they're building things on their own that aren't part of the, so to speak, IT plan, and then they can migrate into that plan as we see the value come. The biggest value for end user development or low code development is that the people that understand the problem best are the ones trying to bring a solution to it.
Yeah.
And there's always two kinds of expertise in it. You have domain expertise and you have technical expertise, and one has to learn one or one has to learn the other if we don't have things like low code. Either the technical experts have to learn the business expertise, domain expertise, or vice versa, and then that always becomes a little more problematic. So that's the key to me.
Great perspective, Skip. And Leanne, I'm curious if you want to jump in here, because I know there's some similarities between your organizations. You have many very strong technical people outside of IT at DOE, and you're running corporate systems. Skip talked a lot about that a corporate approach and what do you do and when you don't. How does low code fit into your work?
Well, we have a lot of people who want, it's like our data is accounting data, procurement data. There's a lot of people who want to do analysis of that for a variety of reasons. And we have a data warehouse that we support, which allows you to ask us to pull data out of the main databases, because we don't have everything available, because it would just be too unwieldy, and most of it is stuff that most people don't care about anyway. So you can ask us to pull this down, and then you can analyze it yourself, or we can help you do it if you don't have the capability on your own. The low code solutions are probably ones that we're going to use to help those folks who are coming to us who don't have any IT technical skills, but want to get some piece of information or some information out of the database. Which, sometimes some of our clients are shall we say, not very good at being logical and coming up with requirements when they ask us for stuff. So we have to spend a little bit of time helping them think through what it is they're really looking for, and then figuring out how to use the data that we have to answer that question once we understand what it is.
Well, I think so often the challenge is really the knowing the data and knowing how the work and the data flow through the organization.
Yes.
And
Yes, that is very true. If you don't understand how the data works, you're going to have some real issues, because
Yeah.
you can draw faulty conclusions from
That's
data if you didn't ask the right question.
it's very two-dimensional if you just look at the numbers. It's that using it and understanding where it comes from and how it flows gives it that third dimension that helps you be successful. So I think that's a point for us to maybe dig into a little bit as we continue the conversation. How do we extract that kind of information from the people in our programs, the business users who we want to give these tools to, so they can be very they can very quickly develop things, so they have that piece. So there's a lot, I think, to explore there as we go forward. But Matisha, I want to turn to you a second and ask a question about getting the organization ready for this kind of new technology. It creates change. That change has to get managed. The culture has to be thought about. Culture change and change management are often overlooked at times. So, I think you offer a great perspective. What do you recommend, and what have you seen be successful here?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like any bright, shiny object, right? We all want to go running to it as fast as we can. And unfortunately, that leaves behind a lot of the things that you need to think about in advance, and the work that needs to be done before you can get to your bright, shiny object. And any time that we're working toward a change, we're dealing with a lot of people. And I like to say people are going to people. And that's a messy place to live in, right? And so we have to create this really safe space for a learning environment, building that culture that expects people to ask questions, expects people to raise their hand and say, I don't think I get this. I don't think I understand. What about this? And be responsive to those challenges. There's got to be tons and tons of communication before you're ever really getting anywhere. And you can't, in this environment with low code, expect that only the technologists and the developers are going to be doing that work. The
Right.
Citizen developer is going to come to the forefront, and you got to find the people who are going to be those change agents, raising their hand and saying, I want to learn this. I want to lead in this space. I want to help us get there. And just over communicate. To be honest with you, there's just no way you can communicate too much when you're going through this process. And that means not just communicating that we are on this journey of change, that we're moving through a transformation, but we're communicating what the real impact is going to be. And we're communicating it in the places that people care about. And so if CIO is taking the lead here and saying, I'm going to communicate what the impact is, and this is the changes that are going to be made by CIO, that may not really resonate with someone who's not sitting in CIO.
Right.
So talking about those real use cases of things that the low code technology is going to help change in their space that they care about, how they'll do their work, what the outcomes of their work will be, how they'll engage with someone else. Those use cases are going to be incredibly helpful for gaining not only buy-in, but really just an understanding. And then rewarding any behaviors, good behaviors you see across the spectrum of people who get engaged and stay engaged and raise their hand and sort of help create a process that works. And then finally, of course, leadership buy-in is always important, but it's not just, hey, leadership saying, I embrace this and we're doing good and this is where we're going, but leaders actually showing that they're embracing the change itself, that they're engaging, that they're utilizing the new tech, and that they're modeling that behavior that we're expecting from everyone across the organization. And then my very, very last comment here is something that we probably will talk about more in this conversation, which is training and development.
Yeah,
and I really would just say training and development programs around this have to not just build the skills, but someone's confidence to
Hmm.
be a part of it.
That's a great point. And I could imagine a world where everybody at HUD or everybody at the Copyright Office, wherever, is getting some kind of training about how to use these tools to meet their day-to-day needs. To how do they get access to data? How they use a low-code tool to do something with that data so they can accomplish their mission more successfully. It's a beautiful idea that this becomes, a very basic kind of training as a part of the culture of that organization. That's, when it's really embedded, which, is where we want to get to. We need,
Absolutely. And,
yeah, I
and
mean,
digital literacy is what I would consider the most like the hottest commodity at this point, and that's at all levels in the organization. And so if you haven't done sort of laid that groundwork within your employee base to let them know and sort of set that expectation, everyone is expected to be part of this digital transformation. And so even if you're not actually developing anything, you need to have a minimum understanding so that you can see applications and how this could benefit your work.
well, it's a great vision, and there's a lot of steps to get to that vision. And we had a question come in that Suman answered about governance. And Suman, I wonder if you could, share a little bit of what you're talking about. And Skip, I'd love for your take on this too, because this whole governance piece is really critical. And if we don't have governance around this, we're not going to decrease that bottleneck. We're going to increase it because things are going to go haywire. So the question that came in, how do we govern this? What are the rules or regulations? I like to think about, maybe having some guardrails that could be established. So, Suman, do you want to elaborate on your point about risk assessments?
Sure. Yeah. So we do have similar situations. We have, hundreds of spreadsheets sitting on the shared drive, and people want to access that, and they cannot, not two people can edit at the same time unless we have it on multiple networks connected on the live source. That brings up, people can edit, delete, or update the content, may overwrite things. We do have access databases, which are sitting on legacy systems or even updated systems. We do lots of risk assessment here. We look at if they are, sitting on the updated servers, has those servers or the version that we are using of, whether it's an access database or the spreadsheets or the servers they're sitting on, they're updated, they're patched, they are under the firewall. There's a monitoring app installed, so we can have a visibility who's accessing those applications or systems, who's working on those systems, and what kind of information sits on there. If there's a PI information, if there's something should be restricted, and who can manipulate those. So those kind of risk assessment, validation, and making sure those risks are addressed at various levels. And then, putting those security protocols around that and having a standardized approach to make sure it's safeguarded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an important step that, again, we can't miss, or if we don't, let me say it this way, I think if we don't do it, then it's very hard to make these tools something that become commonplace in our outside of IT organizations, because you have to do that in order to use them safely, create those kind of guardrails as I described it. And Skip, can you add here maybe? And how do we we want to eliminate bottlenecks, right? So what does that look like from a CIO perspective?
Yeah, so bottlenecks are probably one of the driving reasons for low code, is because the IT can't get to everything that people want done. But you also don't want to make a bottleneck within that. And however, it is necessary to have some kind of governance, because without it, you will have no corporate strategy or no way of getting to the end goals that you want as an organization. I think that governance should be run not by the CIO office, but by mission, with CIOs being a participant in that. There can be some established guardrails, as you mentioned, things like, if what you're doing is affecting anyone but you personally, then you need to raise the visibility. And then, as I mentioned before, that it cannot be an onerous, heavy governance. It's got to be light and quick, but it has to depend on the two things that I mentioned earlier, and that's visibility or transparency and communication. And so if people are willing to, hey, this is what I'm working on, what do you think, and we have that communication, then I think that's where most of the problems are going to be solved in those kinds of discussions.
Leanne, you had a great quote on governance the other day. If you want to, I don't know if you remember what you said, but I wrote it down in case you can't remember. You say governance requires.
I'm not sure. I don't remember what I said. I'm sorry.
Governance requires consensus. And I thought that was so great of a concept because, what we're all talking about is communication. As Matisha, you can't over communicate these things, you can't have enough conversation. How have you gone about, creating that consensus? You have to have practical governance, like Skip said, but unless people agree. So what have you done to create that?
Well, before I came to CF, before I came to the CFO's office, I worked in the CIO's office. And my first assignment was to come up with a governance process that governance is very unpopular at DOE because nobody likes to be told what to do. They think of life as being a giant discussion of everything, and that whole military sort of, order, I give you an order and you do it thing just doesn't cut it. Right. And so what we did was we started with a really bland document. We invited everybody to meetings, or we invited them to edit it. We would send, we'd wait a week, we'd send out the edits, we'd identify only the new stuff that was in there so they didn't have to read the whole document. And we kept sending it out. We had meetings where people could come and talk in person. They could come and talk to me individually, privately, if they wanted to. And basically, we were able to get consensus because everyone was so sick of working on this document. They wanted the process to be over, but we got consensus and everybody could live with it. And it's a very messy process and it took a while, but in the end, it was, everybody had played a role in it, or if they hadn't played a role in it, they weren't in a position to complain because they'd had everybody else knew that they had an opportunity, that everybody had an opportunity to participate. And if they chose not to, that was fine. But they, it's like there was no sympathy for somebody who didn't participate because they could have. And so it's, and this was a broader, this wasn't just a low code kind of thing. This was a broader IT thing for the whole department. But I would recommend that process, even though, like I said, it's messy and kind of miserable in a lot of ways. But by getting to something that everybody agreed to, when you execute it, they're kind of like, well, okay, I don't really like the way this turned out for me in this instance, but I did agree to it, so I can live with it, kind of thing.
So we're going to come back to this concept in just a second. Maddie, can you share the results from our first poll question? Interestingly, the thing that's holding people back, resources, but just above resources are unclear requirements. It's not governance. I was curious, if that was going to be the top. So maybe people have the governance figured out, or maybe more likely it's if we had the resources and we knew what the requirements were, the governance would, continue to appear as a big challenge for us. I think that the unclear requirements, is one of the things that, has plagued IT for, our history, certainly. And perhaps by bringing the program folks, the business unit people into the mix more directly by letting them have these tools to develop applications, the requirements will be a little bit clearer because they're their requirements. Maybe, right? Maybe there's something.
Maybe my experience, it depends on the user group. And if you have people who, like scientists who are pretty logical, they're better at doing, logical people are better at doing requirements than people who are not really skilled in that area. And it's very frustrating. I mean, my IT folks have, I won't name names, but one of our client groups is very bad at identifying requirements. And then you get it out of them, and then they're like, okay, and then we start working on it, and then 2 weeks later they're like, well, we kind of changed our mind on that. We really want you to do this instead. And it's just a never-ending cycle, and they're just bad at identifying their requirements. And I'm not, we try to help them work through what they're trying to do, but it's very frustrating.
Well,
Yeah, I found a little trick
Thanks.
over the years with helping people get to requirements, because they usually come to you with a solution, not a requirement.
Yes.
And they do that themselves. So I call it the 5 whys. When they say, I need this, I say why. And they say because, and then I say why. And usually by the time I get to my 5th why, and we're down to actual requirement. And so sometimes that collaboration can work even in a low code environment. Sometimes they need help where you can start to then you get them at least headed in the right direction when they go.
yeah. So, and maybe in these low code environments where we can develop rapidly, we can see these things, the result of our application development efforts quickly, and react to that, and not be caught up in writing the requirement.
As long as you're willing to fail fast,
Yeah,
it works well. And that's true for the mission side of the house too. If they say, oops, yeah, that wasn't what we really wanted, let's throw that one out and then keep going. Fail quickly is also valuable with low code, because it can develop very rapidly. Therefore, you can evaluate it very rapidly.
so we're getting a lot of questions in the Q&A. I want to go to our next poll question, Maddie, which is about what are we getting by doing this work to bring in these different groups, and curious what people think in this case. But as we go through that, I want to pivot to one of the questions we have, which is about security testing and validation and PII. Anybody who's using these tools have anything you want to share? Suman, I'm curious what your thoughts are here, perhaps on cybersecurity related to these tools.
Yes. So as being an information system business owner, we regularly have to go through the ATO process, and that requires updating our SOPs, service operating procedures. We have to go through the PII information updates. What is our PTA thresholds, the privacy threshold operating levels. We have to go through what PIA information is hosted. So we have to go through all the security validation for each system, how it is monitored, where it sits, which system it's talking to, whether it's outside the firewall of the agency's a DMZ zone, whether it's an internal system or available to the outside users, what's the boundary and things like that. So we have to go through those assessments and make sure the right security protocols in place. The system is well patched. It's on the current version, does not have any security threats, or are there any vulnerabilities or any kind of threat that could jeopardize the agency mission, accessing those systems. So we do go through those security protocols and have annual security trainings for the users, as well as the people monitoring those systems. So definitely there is a verification and validation. Both, is the system working right, or are we working with the right system?
What I'm hearing you say is using low code does not eliminate the need for good cybersecurity work.
No, security is essential. Essential doesn't matter. It's a low code, high code, whatever it is, security is needed.
Still spending time and effort to ensure the security of our data and systems and interconnections.
As she mentioned.
Yeah, please continue, Skip.
As she mentioned, when you introduce a low-code environment, it has to be ATO.
Yes.
And
Right.
ATO would set the guardrails for things like what data can be accessed,
Mhm.
you know, how it can be used and so forth. And so you have to establish that from the beginning. And in some cases, maybe you want to establish a sandbox where people can practice and work and try things out. And that, you know, if you're using low code to help drive to the basic requirements that will eventually become an enterprise type system, then things like sandbox and other environments are good because it protects you. If they're just for daily work efforts, then you have to have those guardrails established through the ATO process so that we're not exposing wrong.
So one of the, I think that's a really good point. Again, reiterating, you can't, ignore cybersecurity because you're using this kind of tool. You still go through ATOs and these things. I do think that when you're working on a platform and you're able to inherit a lot of these security controls and security features that are built into the platform, you can get there faster. But the message that I want everybody to take away from this is, you still got to do the work. You might be able to go a little bit faster because things have been done by the underlying platform, but you can't ignore cybersecurity requirements going forward.
Well, you have to do the contingency planning. You have to do the disaster recovery. You
Yeah,
have to
that's right.
do all those things that's needed, irrespective of what system it
An
is.
excellent point for the audience to hear. And Maddie, can you put up the second poll results, please? So interestingly, by a wide margin, greater ownership of outcomes by groups outside of IT is the main value people see in bringing these groups in. And having worked in IT my whole career, I love this. And I agree, because it's never just the CIO who's responsible for these things. It's got to be a shared responsibility. And Matisha, I want to bring it back to you. And from a people perspective, how do we reinforce this shared accountability, shared responsibility, shared successes and shared failures inside an organization?
Yeah. Again, people are going to people, but I think we've got to do. I was really enjoying that discussion, by the way, on the requirements, especially as someone who doesn't sit in an IT or a CIO function, and who's probably being asked to deliver those requirements to a developer. And my whole experience being like, they don't seem to understand me, right? They don't seem to understand what I'm saying or what I'm trying to convey or communicate to them. And so there's two languages being spoken here, and there's no translator. There's no one in the middle who can figure out what I'm saying as the business owner and what IT needs to hear as the technical requirement owner. Taking business requirements to technical requirements is a skill. And so I think this is another element of that we have to figure out what resources can we offer. And that might be training, but it might actually just be, is there a form? Is there a process? Is there a format that we can help the business owners put their requirements into a place that then can be easily communicated and understood by someone on the CIO or IT side? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I think that's a big piece of all of this, and this idea of really creating that safe space is that I talked about earlier, is how we get us all on the same page together, and maybe removing some of these barriers and these challenges that we're facing. Is that it's okay that you as the business owner don't necessarily know what you need to know from an IT standpoint, and I don't understand your business as the IT owner, but we're still going to work toward that same goal together.
But if you give, as the CIO, if I give you a tool where you can create your application, you can build your requirements that you may not be able to articulate to me as the CIO well, we can eliminate that step maybe, because you have the tools and you can build what you need.
We can, as long as we also understand that whole governance piece, that we understand that we can't just build whatever we want and however we want, and that there's got to be protections of the data and of privacy that are supportable.
Yeah.
And so I even with this idea of a citizen developer, which can take the lead, it doesn't remove IT completely and fully from the process.
Leanne, I know you want to jump in here and then Suman will get to you. Leanne?
Yeah, what I was gonna say is I spent most of my career being that person in the middle who understood enough about the IT. I mean, I do not have an IT background. I mean, I did learn, I'll date myself here. I learned how to program in Fortran on punch cards. But I never, but I worked in finance in the finance area most of my career. One of the things that I did was automated a routine paper process for 50 offices. And we had lenders using a portal, which doesn't sound like a big thing, but it was when we did it because it was a first. And I spent a lot of my career being that person that you're talking about, Letitia, because I understood enough about the IT about the IT stuff that I could go and talk, you know, I knew the finance side of it, the business side of it. And so I could put it into language that the IT people understood because they didn't understand. They had the same issue on their side that you have on the business side. And you have to have some idea. I mean, and I think this is an interesting thing with the low code. Yeah, you can give people low code, but if they don't understand how the IT, the basic structure of databases and how IT works, you're still going to have a problem because they're going to program something that doesn't work because it's not asking for the right stuff, or it's not doing it in the right order, or it's, you know,
The most fundamental thing is you got to know the data. And you have to know how the data and the work.
Well, you have to know the data, but if you don't understand how the data is structured and how you can, you know, and how you can get what you want out of the data, you're not going to have, you know, you're going to have a problem.
And what is the workflow? How does the work move through the agency? You know, because you might want to be changing that or adjusting. And so all that is upfront stuff that we have to do, whether it was a low code or a pro code or any kind of COTS package. If you don't know this stuff, you're going to struggle with your project. But Suman, I know you've been very patient. I know you have something to add here. So please do.
Oh, no, thank you. I so 100% agree with Matisha's, argument about having IT separate from the business. With the whole mandate of IT centralization, we have moved all the IT functions expertise into the realm of OCIO, leaving the business alone. They understand their process, they understand their business, they understand what needs to be done here, but they do not know how to translate into the IT language. So the technical professionals can understand, oh, well, the data, this application should work like this, but how it relates to the data at the back end or the infrastructure at the back end and what validation should be put in front. So there is a gap. And that's the reason we had similar situations at Copyright Office too. We have business analysts who would talk to the business, understand what they need and translate that into a technical requirement so at least technical folks can understand. Still, we have the issue. Still, there is a gap because there is not, the IT folks do not have understanding of business and business do not have understanding of IT. So there is a gap. In my previous job at DC government, we would have at least couple of specialized technical folks sitting in the business domain. So they not only understand technology, they would also understand the business processing. So for them, it was easier to translate both ways. They could tell business folks, hey, you want this, but as per technology, these are the solutions you can get or would be the best fit. And at the same time, they would tell technical folks, hey, business needs this, so your technical solution is not going to work. You need to figure out a way to accommodate these requirements here. So we have often overlooked that bridge. We have often not looked to bridge that gap, so it's easier to work with, irrespective of tool, technology, whatever it is there.
Mm-hmm.
The mandates come from the directional plan, from the strategic goal. We are getting directions, initiatives from there, and we do justify those for getting the budget and procurement and stuff like that. But do we actually go to that level of training those folks, bridging those gaps, or actually understanding the requirement in terms of business and technology?
Yeah, those are extra steps that we have to do though.
Yes.
And, if we're structuring these organizations, centralized versus maybe more federated, or the challenge remains, we have to have that translation between business and IT, whether it happens at a inside the program office using a low code tool or happen in the CIO office. So we've continually struggled with that, I think. So there's something, Matisha, maybe you can jump back in for just a second here on how do we teach or how do we, educate inside our organizations? What are the basic things, whether it's around data or process or even terminology? I'd love any thoughts you have here because this keeps coming back. We keep coming back to this.
I know. That's why I'm here. So I think what you're talking about is like this basic foundational knowledge, like what's going to be important for everyone to understand. And some of that might be what are these formats of business requirements, and how does that end up getting translated into functional requirements or technical requirements that are developed by someone, whether that's inside or outside OCIO. And so having those basics, just like what anybody needs to understand, the terminology, how to talk to one another so that we're using the same language instead of separate languages, is going to be valuable. And then getting into some platform specific features, so depending on what solutions you're actually implementing within your environment, you need to get a bit more in depth. And that's going to vary depending on the role of the individual employees and how they're interacting with the system. But making sure that once you first establish that foundation, the basics of the technology, and then start getting into some of the platform specific features. I think it also is bringing in best practices. And this can be as simple as briefings from those that have already been there, and showing how they went from nothing to where they are today. And that also helps the business owners understand their use cases and what they're trying to strive for. And actually I want to, if I had a clap emoji, I would have given it to Skip earlier when he was talking about sandbox environments, because I think that that's another safe space that we're creating for people to sort of practice and learn before it gets critical, right? And we can early before implementation, before large scale projects get deployed, we can actually ask people to start joining communities of practice, be in a sandbox environment, create challenges where there's some fun competition and it's all low stress for everyone to see what they're made of, what they can actually do in the system. And then I'd say this is another opportunity to make connections with people. And so pairing experienced developers with new developers or citizen developers and helping them sort of get up to speed and understand and talk the lingo and learn about the systems and platforms they're using, and build those skills up. And that may also be identifying where the skill gaps exist. So assessing your workforce, where are the right places to invest in, some training or some targeted focus, and then helping your workforce get there in the critical areas first, and then broadly across the board.
Yeah, very good. I'm curious if Leanne, Skip, or Suman, you have any other thoughts about training the program offices, the business owners on these tools? Have you done it? Have you had success? Suman?
Yes. I have recently introduced Enterprise Business Intelligence Solution, which is very much, you do not have to do much programming into it. It's more like a drag drop, creating dashboards, extracting KPIs or metrics from the data. Initially, there was a huge pushback because people were not aware of that tool, did not know how to use it. It was more of a cultural shift from how they were doing things, and then we have to show them, what the value it brings to them. So we had to do training sessions to show them with the basics of how it works, how we can handhold them and walk them through those tools and how it can be beneficial for them. So a cross-platform training we did cross-platform training within our team, as well as also with the business users, and did multiple sessions, hand-holding, walkthroughs, and was there whenever they had questions. Usually there is a feeling that, they will be judged, or they don't know what we're talking about, or this could replace their workload, or there are multiple things with those whole cultural organizational shift happening. We did some training. once they started learning, once they were comfortable with the tool and they saw the value, they saw how they could have a visibility into data and applications and stuff like that, they're loving it. And now they want more of it. So it's more about getting comfortable with those tools and understanding and having someone to train them, or they know there's a go-to person I can get help.
Yeah, that's it's a great example and shows that it's possible, right? You know,
Yes.
yeah, Skip, go ahead.
The interesting thing is that the tools are getting better and better. So
Yeah.
the difficulty of using them, we can talk about generative AI type tools that are really easy. The problem is understanding at a deeper level to know about the quality of what you're getting. Getting results is easy, but what's the quality? And Samuel Clemens said, "It ain't what we don't know; it's what we know that just ain't so." and I think that's what gets in the way is we think we understand it, and so the training and the understanding part we almost have to discover, because these things are changing so fast. You can hand tools to people; they can get up to speed very
well. You're right. It is changing very quickly. I know. Within ServiceNow, just as an example, we embrace generative AI and add it into our platform. We're developing capabilities that will allow a text to code capability. So someone who wants to develop something on ServiceNow low code capabilities can type in what they're looking for, and the platform can generate something. So it becomes so easy, to your point, and it's so quick to do these things. It could get away from us if we're not governing and managing it well. So there's a lot changing, and we have to keep our eye on it. Go ahead, but hold your thought for just a second. Maddie, can you put up our last poll question, please? And we'll come back to you, Skip. So what's really helping to drive success with these platforms? Curious what people think here. Now, Skip, please continue.
I was just saying, for me, the real key to this whole discussion is, what is it we're trying to accomplish? So if it is for workers, for people that are working to get information to help them make better decisions and so forth, then low code's that's a very rich environment. If we're producing data products for dissemination as an organization, that's maybe not as good a fertile ground because of the need for consistency and for making sure that we're producing the right thing. And so I think in some of the examples that others have been given, and ServiceNow potentially, I've got information in there I need to find out that will help me make a decision. That's a fertile environment. So it's kind of the query idea, and that's good. The only issue there is being able to judge the quality of what you're getting. And that's more of an issue on, say, the open internet as opposed to maybe a corporate environment. But the idea of, I'm going to build this that we're now going to use as a corporate asset, it's going to be one of our products, that probably has to be more of an enterprise kind of solution. So to me, that's kind of the dividing line.
Yeah, it requires some thoughtfulness. Maddie, can you put up the answers to the last poll question, please? It looks like people are really focused on automation and having more developers and better focus. So the automation piece, I think, is really critical and ties into what you're suggesting there, Skip. If we're going to speed things up for people, or we're going to meet a low level, a requirement in a program office, there's maybe a very manual workflow and you can automate it. That's great. It's not necessarily a corporate solution because maybe just a process for our office. If it is a corporate process that you want to automate, maybe you need more thoughtfulness, and it's more complex. Maybe it touches more underlying systems of record or other technologies that it's harder. So there is a scoping conversation that we have to have here too. We only have about 5 minutes left, and there's one question in the chat, and I have one other question that I want to see if we can meet in the chat. Someone asked, do we settle inside an organization? Do we settle on one low code tool, or do we potentially have many? I'm curious, Leanne, why don't you start with this? How do you envision that, and get some people's thoughts on this? And then related, it's not just low code tools. We have traditional development tools and, other technologies we use to meet requirements, as Skip was alluding to, for corporate capabilities. What's the balance, and how do we strike that balance in an ongoing manner as these low code tools change? So let's start with you, Leanne, and see what people think. And then if there's any other best practices, lessons learned, or thoughts, please share them as we try and come to closure on some of these ideas.
Well, we were using Apex, and we've done a lot of development with that, but then we've been tasked with doing something else, doing another project that we hadn't done before. And there were people that wanted to use Python for that. So I think the answer generically to the question is that we may have preferences, but other people have preferences too, and we have to be flexible. And I mean, my way of looking at it is all of these tools change. I mean, some of those tools are probably a little more stable than others, but I mean, when I think about all of I was cleaning out a desk when I changed jobs, and I was finding Lotus 1, 2, 3 instructions and other stuff. So you have to evolve as stuff becomes better. And so I think you just kind of have to go with the flow.
So, sure. So flexibility, inside an organization is always important. Any other thoughts, Skip or Suman, on how we're balancing these different technologies, low code versus pro code versus how many we might have?
You mentioned automation. For probably the very best low code or no code systems are very specific, and so they're only going to do certain things. And you have to, if you're looking for a general one, if you want one, it's got to be a general tool. Those are much harder to come by, much harder to use. The better they are, they tend to be more specific. That's a generalization, I realize. But so I think it's just a sort of almost a one-by-one decision. You want the minimum set that will do the job. You don't want more than what you need, but that number is hard to come by. What is that number?
I'd offer it's probably more than one, just based on experience.
Certainly based on our experience, that would be the case.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think it's healthy to have that flexibility.
Yeah, that's, I was fine with it when I thought about it, because I was like, okay, we're going to have to hire more people that know how to do this, but that's okay too. I mean, I told my boss that, and he's like, fine. So let's,
I think it was
tell me what you need.
Right. That's right. And, again, I always offer that, these organizations we're a part of are large, complex entities, and it's rarely a one size fits all. So having tools in the toolbox gives you flexibility that's really highly valued. Suman, any thoughts? Then Matisha, I'm going to come to you to help close us out.
Sure. Yes, it absolutely goes back to the very discussion we had about the business requirement. Everything is governed by that. Whatever comes from the strategic goal and the business requirement, we need to figure out what fits into that realm. So if the business requirement is we can deal with the low code solutions that general users can use with a minimum effort and a maximum productivity, we can do that. If the business requires, we need to have a very highly secure, sophisticated system, because the data is very critical, mission critical, and has to be secure and needs some kind of complexity around that. So we need that kind of solution for that. So we cannot have one solution for all in an agency or even in division. Depends upon the business requirement, depends upon what kind of work we are going to do and what is the need for that.
Well, very good. Thank you, Suman. And Matisha, can you help close us out with any final thoughts from this conversation, or what might be coming next for low code at HUD?
I mean, I think in just very briefly, what I heard in summarization of this discussion and what I think we all agree on is leaving a legacy mindset behind and embracing that digital mindset. in order to transform all of government to a more modern public sector. And we can't just rely on OCIO or IT folks to get there. So for us, it's about expanding the impact of our OCIO shop, of the IT developers that we have, so that we can actually accomplish the needs of the entire department to meet the citizens' needs.
That's a great way to help us conclude. It's a really wonderful thought, and I suspect something every agency leadership team is trying to do. So, thank you. I know that we have one last question today.
I just want to interrupt here, Matisha. I'm going to use your sentence using legacy, moving from legacy mindset to the digital mindset. I'm going to use that. So
It's so great. It's not only does the audience learn from our panelists learn from us. Pretty incredible. There's one last polling question out there about whether or not you want CPE credit. So please answer that if you want credit for this event. And, this is a really hot topic, low code. We hear about it a lot. Rolling it out successfully, getting value from the investments you have to make around it, it can be hard. But, I think we heard today that it's possible. And there's a lot of approaches and things that this panel talked about can help you be successful, whether it's about communication or it's about governance and thinking about security and, really evaluating the tools that you're going to be using and how many and how they fit together. So there's not a one size fits all around this, but there's definitely some steps I think we can all take to be more successful. And I want to thank the panelists, Leanne Oliver, Matisha Montgomery, Skip Bailey, and Suman Shukla for your comments. It was very insightful. I definitely took away some notes that and ideas that I'm going to use going forward too. And to our audience, thank you all for attending. And I look forward to continuing this conversation with you all very soon. Thanks and have a great day.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.